Hello, family. This right here is a recap of this is an interview from Mamie Till Mobley, the mother of Emmett Till, recounting her time dealing with the demise of Emmett Till, the murder of Emmett Till, and it recaps what she went through personally through the trial, the funeral, and finding out that the perpetrators didn't get sent to justice. This shows her being pulled into the civil rights movement. She expresses her feelings of what happened during that time and how it affected her life, the smear campaigns that they tried to put against her. So it shows it's a real powerful interview to show what she had to go through. This is a recap of what she went through during the funeral, the murder, and the trial of Emmett Till. So this is a first-hand account of what she experienced. This is a good interview. It's a must watch for everybody to see how this happens in this country and how racism has really overtaken this country. But this is a good interview for people to understand the depths and the limits and the judicial system and how it was in Mississippi and how people from Chicago didn't understand what was going on in the South.
Yeah, You were saying that you asked them not to work on Emmett, but that when you came back, they had done a little bit of work.
They had done a great deal of work.
My question is, so what you're telling me is then that the pictures that we see, right?
Yes.
As horrible as they are.
Yes.
It was worse when you first saw it.
Those pictures are fantastic when it comes to what I originally saw. The pictures were 10 times better than Emmett looked when I looked at his body unretouched.
It's because Rayner and them actually did a little bit of work. They
did a whole lot of work. They closed his mouth. They removed that eye. They got his tongue back in his mouth. They sewed his head and skull back together. I mean, they did an awful lot of work.
Why? I mean, one of the. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your decision to leave the casket open. I mean, I think that is one of the most important decisions that one of the most important decisions in the whole civil rights movement that you and to a lot of people.
Yes.
That you decided to leave the casket open. Why?
Well, the crowd was so huge at the funeral parlor until I knew that the people could not pass by the funeral and by the body. It would take hours for that crowd to dissipate, and people were still coming. So it was necessary for me to come forth and help control the crowd. We had quite a few white police officers, and when they would push the crowd back, there would be an angry explosion. There would be swearing and everything. The white policemen were just not welcome. The black people were ready to tear them to shreds. So they put me in a window, and I stood in the window and I talked to the crowd, and I told them that they would be able to come in and view Emmett. But please let us go ahead with what we had to do, and when we left, the body would still be available. And when I would talk to them, they would quiet down and they would ease up. But early Saturday morning, this was Friday evening, early Saturday morning, I received a call from Rayner, and he said, would you please tell us where we can relocate the body, because they're going to tear my establishment off of its foundation. And I told him to take the body to 4021 South State Street. That was the mother church of the Churches of God in Christ in Illinois. And Bishop Isaiah Roberts was the pastor. And I don't know. I didn't call him and ask him, could I do this? I just did it. And oddly enough, he accepted the assignment. He put Emmett in the basement, and the people would come in one door. They would pass by the casket. Then they had two ways they could go out. They could go out a side door, or they could go out the way they came in. So the people walked day and night. I got 2 or 3 reports from the procession that was going on there. And I was told that somebody had put out 2 number 3 wash tubs. Those are the tubs we used to bathe in. And they were being filled with money, and ever so often they would disappear. Well, they would disappear and they would put out 2 more tubs. And it seems that people were just dropping money like mad. And out of that money, I got enough to take care of the funeral. And I had about $250 left over, which I put in a savings account.
Okay. You should probably get close.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about. I want to go back to. I guess it was in the funeral home when the body first arrives that you made the decision to leave the casket open. Mm-hmm. You said I want the world to see.
That's right.
Why did you make the decision to leave the casket open?
Well, I knew that I could not tell people what I had seen. Number one, they wouldn't believe me. But if I had 200 or 300 witnesses, then all of us could testify to what they had done to Emmett. And I thought the world needed to know what was going on in Mississippi. And that was the only way they would know, would be for me to pull the cover off and let the world see what was going on.
Let me ask you the question. The funeral seems like it was pretty emotional.
Very emotional. Number one, the church was crowded to the extent that we didn't know if the balconies were going to collapse and fall down on the rest of the people or what. But again, I had to speak over the loudspeaker and tell the people if they would just be patient and let us have our funeral, we would leave and the church would be open for them to come and go as long as they wanted to. Because I thought that pretty soon the crowd would die down. It looked like all of Chicago was there. But this procession continued from Friday evening until Tuesday afternoon. We had Labor Day coming in there on a Monday. And that meant that all day Saturday, all day Sunday, all day Monday until about noon Tuesday, people were marching. And they said that about 1 in every 5 had to be assisted out of the building. They would just go into a faint. Pregnant women were coming, and their families were trying to dissuade them from looking at what was in the casket. But they came anyway. And they had to tie off the State Street traffic because the crowd spilled from the sidewalk, which was unusually wide, all the way out into the roadway itself. And they rerouted the traffic. And Tuesday, when I got back to take Emmett and go to Burr Oak with him, they had to force an opening for me to get through. And we went in, we led the body out, and we proceeded to Burr Oak Cemetery. And I am told that that is the largest procession in the history of Chicago. And the only one might have exceeded it, And that was when Mayor Washington died.
And people, brought their kids to see the body, to view the viewing. Why did people bring kids?
Oh, the people that I have talked to wanted their children to remember what had happened to Emmett Till. And they wanted them to face up to reality that the black man in America is not free. And this is all that I can say. They wanted their children to know the dangers of living in America, because so many people sent their children south for the summer. When school was out, the kids would go south. And they wanted them to know that it is very hazardous in the South, so you have to watch your step.
Okay, well, because one of the ways that the world thinks of you is as an activist and somebody who's very involved. And we're talking about before 1955, let's say 1954. Were you an activist? Were you involved in, black causes and stuff? Were you an activist then?
Not really. I contributed to the NAACP, and I always gave in the community chest rally that was taken up to divide among the various charities. But my job was my job. I had to raise Emmett, and I had to go to my job. And I never took a day off from work. And I was just in my own personal little groove. And I thought when I took care of Emmett and took care of the job that I had, that was just all I could do.
So there's a clip of you speaking to a group, maybe it's like a week or 10 days after Emmett's murder. And you're already now you're involved, and you when you look in your eyes, you look like you're almost still in shock, but there you are out there, speaking. Why did you feel it was necessary to? What was the change in you that a week afterwards you're now out there speaking?
Well, number one, if I had had to hold all of this inside of me, I would have exploded. I needed to talk about it. I needed to wake people up. It wasn't a job that I could do alone. It was going to take a lot of us working together to change the scenario. And there were so many people who were after me to come and speak. And I was afraid of falling into the hands of the wrong people. I didn't want to get involved with any communist or any disreputable organizations. So I went to New York and I asked the head of, Roy Wilkins, the head of the NAACP, to help me to set up my places of speaking for me, because I figured they would know who was legit and who was not. And in the meantime, he told me that my speaking would generate funds for them to send an attorney to Mississippi with me to fight my case. So I was more than willing to talk and gather the money to help this. What I didn't know was that the NAACP was broke following Brown versus the Board of Education. I read later in Jet magazine that in 3 months I had raised $250,000 for them. And that was, oh my God, that was money, money, money. Now it doesn't seem very significant. But in 1955, if you had $10,000 in your bank account, you were secure for life. You didn't have to worry about, you had no financial worries. So $250,000, that was really, they were on their feet again. So that's why I was able and willing to go and speak where they had me to speak.
What did you think when you heard that they would try two white men for the murder? In Mississippi. Do you remember what you thought?
Oh, I was elated. At last, Mississippi is going to rise up and do what she is supposed to do. The fact that they arrested the men, that was a triumph. And I expected to go to Mississippi, attend the trial, and walk out victorious. We have won a victory already, just the fact that two white men had been arrested for a crime against a black man. So that in itself was a giant step forward. Outside, there was the sun beaming down and the people, the curiosity seekers. It was really like they were going to a big celebration of some kind. They wanted to know what was going to happen with this black woman down here testifying and all of that stuff, because I was not supposed to be in Mississippi. They had threatened me and had threatened Mayor Daley if he allowed me to come. But I had made the decision that I had no choice in the matter. I had to be in Mississippi. I had business there. And it was with this in mind that I went. And when my father said he would go with me, oh my God, I felt like I had the whole world on my side. And then there was Rayfield Moody, my stepfather's nephew. He said, I asked him, would he go? He said, what do you mean, will I go? He said, if you go, I go. And here I am with these two daring men, one on each side. I just felt like I could conquer the world. And so this was our attitude, but when we got there, we experienced something altogether different. They were belligerent. They were angry that I was coming in there to upset their way of life. And they didn't spare any pains to let me know how unwelcome I was.
How were you treated in the courtroom? How were you treated?
Like dirt. I felt, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was nothing. I was looked at and over. Other people were being served in the courtroom, and I was dying of thirst. And when we would try to get service, they would look at us like we were invisible and turn their heads and go in the other direction. There was nothing we could buy in that courtroom. If we needed to take a rest break, we had to leave the courtroom and go about 2 blocks in the hot sun to a black cafe. And that's where we were able to relieve ourselves. The accused were given free access to the judge's chambers. When they needed to go, they went into the judge's chambers, and that's where they did whatever they had to do and came back.
One thing I think that must have been incredible is we saw in the footage, Milam and Bryant with their kids coming in the courtroom, and their kids, and they're being portrayed, in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And they've killed your son.
Yes.
How did that feel when you see them with their kids on their laps and stuff?
I didn't feel, I wasn't amused or thrilled by them having their sons on their knees, because they looked after their children during the proceedings. And the kids were fidgety, as 2- and 3-year-olds would be. And they were demanding a whole lot of attention, which they were getting. And they wanted to eat, they wanted to drink, and so did the fathers. They were eating and drinking. And that only increased our thirst. We were over to the left side of the courtroom in a little at a little homemade table that evidently had been made out of pine, I guess. It was very splintery. And the first day, you know, you have a tendency to put your arm on the table. And every time I would touch the table, I would get the stick of a splinter and it would pull at the fabric in my dress. So I had to learn to sit away from the table. And the next day we brought newspapers to pad the tables with. And as we sat near a window, the let's say that the table was going north and south, and at the north end of the table there was a window, and the men had gotten together and planned our escape in case something unfavorable broke out in the courtroom, which could well have happened. And they decided that one man would jump out, and then the other man would jump out, and they would catch us women as we jumped out. I was there, and Ruby Hurley was there, and Clotilde, somebody by the name of Clotilde. She was a Defender reporter. There were 3 women, and they were going to look out for us, and the rest of the men would have to take their chances. Everybody else, you get out the best way you can. And
so they actually had an escape plan.
Yes, and we did everything except rehearse it. But Congressman Diggs was there, along with 2 more who were attorneys, and there were other people there. I don't know where they were from. I remember mostly the congressman and his 2 men.
Okay, so you had something planned, huh?
Yes, we had an escape plan whereby if anything happened in the courtroom that necessitated our getting out in a hurry, 2 of the men were to leap from the window to the ground and catch the 3 women, the 3 of us who were sitting at the black table. And then the rest of the men would have to get out the best way they could. They would have to take care of themselves. But it was just amazing how tense that courtroom situation was.
Mm-hmm. You were on the 2nd floor, weren't you?
Yes, we were.
So that was kind of a weird plan. First men would have to...
Yes, the men were going to have to land, and then they would catch us. But fortunately, all of us were very neat in size then.
Mm-hmm. You said that they tried to portray Bryant and Milam as family men.
As family men,
okay,
yeah.
You ready? Right. How were Milam and Bryant portrayed?
Milam and Bryant were portrayed as loving family men, devoted to their wives and their children. In fact, each of them had 2 sons, ranging in age from 4 to 2. And each of them had a child nestled on his knee. And the children were playing with daddy, they were playing with one another, they were hitting, they were just doing things that 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds would do. And the fathers were very patient with them. They were listening to see what did they need and how they could satisfy what the kids wanted.
That must have been, give me a real close up. That must have been extra galling. I mean, because these are the men who are accused of killing your son.
Yes.
There they are with their sons being portrayed as family men. So how did that feel? That
didn't feel good. It was it was just such a lie until the truth leaked out anyway. I mean, you knew that these men were not what they were being portrayed to be. And knowing that this was a false opinion that was being reached, I wondered how soon would that veneer crack. I just wondered that.
Mm-hmm.
But the ironic thing is, they took my one son, but both of them lost their two sons. They never saw them grow up.
Yeah. You said that Mose Wright had been afraid. You said that he was obedient. Those were the words that you used when the sheriff told him to bury Emmett Till. To bury Emmett, you said that he was obedient. And
yes.
So, what gave him the courage to testify?
We have asked that question over and over again. Why was he able to stand on the witness stand and point his finger at the two men and name them, call them by their names? This is something that maybe we will never understand, because courage was coming from places where it was not expected to come from. But the truth just came out.
Talk to me about the courage that it took for Mose Wright and Willie Reed to testify, because that's something people don't understand today.
Well, never before in the history of Mississippi had any black man faced a white man and made an accusation against him. That was courage. That was the peak of being courageous. I don't know why Moses Wright felt that he could do this. I certainly don't know why Willie Reed felt he could testify. But they were just like two mice walking into a lion's den when they testified against Milam and Bryant. And to this day, we are wondering what gave them the courage. We know that it had to be the Almighty God, because without His help, none of us would have been able to do what we did.
What was your testimony? What did you say at the trial? What was the crux, the main thing that you said at the trial?
What they wanted out of me was proof positive that was my child. And they would ask me questions, and they would even skew these questions so that if I said yes or no, there was doubt. I might not can remember a direct example, but they alluded to my collaboration with the NAACP, and they concluded, or they summed up by saying, "Isn't it true that you and the NAACP got your heads together and you came down here, and with their help you all dug up a body, and you have claimed that body to be your son? Isn't it true that your son is in Detroit, Michigan with his grandfather right now?" And his grandfather was there with me. But they just did all kinds of scheming to make me out to be a liar and a troublemaker. And then they talked about Emmett's insurance. I had two policies on him. One was a nickel a week, one was a dime a week. The nickel policy would double and bring me $1,000. The dime policy would double and bring me $2,000. And then they wanted to know, did I have Emmett killed so I could collect double indemnity on his insurance? They did everything they could to drag my character down, to make me look like an uncaring mother, a schemer, and a money grubber.
Where were you when the verdict came in, and how did you feel?
When the jury retired, I said to my group, I said, it's time for us to go. And Congressman Diggs said, "What? And missed the verdict?" And I looked at him. I was surprised that he didn't know what the verdict was going to be. And I said, Congressman, this is one verdict you don't want to be present to hear. I said, the verdict is not guilty. And he looked at me and he kind of scoffed at me. I mean, after all, this man is a lawyer and he knows the procedure and he has weighed the evidence, and he knew that they had to come up with a guilty verdict. But because I was so agitated, for my sake, everybody agreed that we would all leave, because I was going to leave whether they left or not. We were in two separate cars. And but to appease me, everybody left. We were out of town about 45 minutes away, between Sumner and Mount Bio, Mississippi, where we were staying. And the verdict came in not guilty. And the town erupted. I mean, the screaming, you could hear guns firing. I mean, it was almost like a 4th of July celebration. Or it was almost as if the White Sox had won the pennant in the city of Chicago. It was just, it was a mess. We were very, very happy that we were 45 minutes away from Sumner, because with that verdict came the additional permission. Well, it was really they gave the okay sign for whites to do in on blacks. And I had seen the black people, as the jury retired, the black people who were standing around the walls began to ease out of the door. And I knew that there was significance to their moving out of the courtroom. And that's when I took my cue that we should leave. But it was open season on blacks. And I think the blacks there knew that the farther they were away from town, the better off they would be. So this, then we heard reports from the jury foreman, and his comment was, it wouldn't have taken us that long, but they told us to make it look good. So we drank soda water and beer and swapped a few jokes. And then we came in with our verdict. It took them 1 hour and 7 minutes to find the culprits not guilty.
You said that when we started talking about the trial, right? You said that when the men were arrested, you were very optimistic. That you were optimistic. When did that turn? You know what I'm saying? You started out optimistic. By the end of the trial, you don't even want to hear the verdict because you know what's going to happen. How did that change happen? When did you go from being optimistic to knowing what the deal was?
I think the Monday that we walked into the courtroom and we could not be seated because of our color, I think that is when my optimism took a downward turn. And as the trial proceeded, and as I watched the antics of the men, their wives, children, and mother, and compared that with the treatment we were getting, I knew then that we didn't have a chance. I saw Milam and Bryant. I've seen it on tape, where Milam and Bryant were questioned after the trial and after the verdict had been given. And they were asked how did they feel or something to that matter. And Roy said, I'm just glad it's over. And when they asked Milam, he repeated what Bryant had said. They were very careful not to give additional information. And they asked the women the same or a similar question, and their responses were very cryptic. And when it got to Juanita Milam, she said, "Me too." That's all she said. But they were not going to let you see what they felt, whether or not they were afraid. They were determined not to let that show.
After the trial, there was still hope that Milam and Bryant would be brought to justice. Talk about that.
After the trial, even though they had been found not guilty, there was still hope had not died, because they had to answer to the kidnapping trial, and they had already admitted that they kidnapped Emmett and that they took Emmett from my uncle's house. And so when that trial was convened, we just knew that justice was going to have to be done here. But that trial was thrown out because they were in a different county than where the kidnapping occurred. So that county had no jurisdiction over the case, so they threw it out. And Moses Wright and Willie Reed went back to Mississippi for this trial. And now that took that certainly took a lot of courage. They had testified at the trial, they had escaped with their lives, and now they're going back into the lion's den to testify again. And when it was thrown out, it was up to them to get out of Mississippi the best way they could. They had no assistance getting them out.
Talk about, at this point, you also appealed to the federal government. You went to Washington. You said something about, like, the president on down should be responsible. Did you have hopes that, again, we're in a period of time, did you have hopes that the federal government would now intervene?
Oh, yes. I mean, Eisenhower was in office, and the whole nation had kind of turned to Eisenhower because they thought he was a fair man. And blacks who had never voted Republican before turned to Eisenhower, helped to vote him in. But when I appealed to the president ended up going, he had a heart attack. He never responded to my telegram. And the next headline I read was, they named the hospital he was in. And that was the only response we had from the president, was a heart attack, and everybody was concerned about his well-being. And no one was concerned about his giving a hand to help out with the Emmett Till case.
So there was what's the word I'm looking for? No relief from the federal government.
No relief whatsoever. I also appealed to J. Edgar Hoover, and he finally responded by saying they had researched the case in its entirety, and no federal rules had been violated. And therefore, the federal government there was no way they could enter the case.
At this time, at the time that there's still a chance of the kidnapping charges being brought against Milam and Bryant, was when they brought out the news of Louis Till's death. So if you could just...
They brought that out during the trial itself, if I remember correctly.
I thought it was. I'm pretty sure it was at the kidnapping. It was at that point when they were trying to indict these men for kidnapping. That's correct, right?
Yeah, in between.
In between.
Murder.
Yeah, yeah. And so they had already been.
The trial was over.
The trial was over, and they
Okay.
they were about to be. There was a chance that they would be indicted for kidnapping, and then this news came out. So, if you can tell me, what the news was about your ex-husband, and how you heard it, and if we can do that, it should not be too long a story. But what happened?
Well, that is what I am yet waiting to find out. No one has ever told me what happened. Senator Eastland came out with the story that Louis had been hung and for rape and murder. There were people in his battalion who wrote to me and talked to me on the phone and talked to Jet Magazine. They said that Louis Till was railroaded, and they talked about him as being a giant of a man who was always laughing and kidding and playing around, and they could not envision him as being a murderer or a rapist. But Louis was a terrific boxer, and he made money with his fist, and he was also a terrific gambler. He lost money with his gambling. That's one of the things that separated us, his not getting home on Friday with money to live on until the next Friday. And Louis not only was good as a boxer, but he would send me V-mail envelopes with checks in them. I would get 3 and 4 a month at $100 a piece. And can you imagine what $300 or $400 a month meant? When the top wage my stepfather was making was between $24 and $26 a week if he worked overtime.
Well, let me ask you again. Because I think it shows the kind of how low, the top level of the people in Mississippi would go. So if you can tell me the story, you had never, the government had sent you a telegram, and this is what you knew and what you believed. But then how did you hear something different? Did you read it in the paper? Did somebody call you? How did you hear that Eastland had this other news?
I'm sure that I read it in the newspaper. I am sure that it came over television and over radio, because there was complete coverage of the Emmett Till case. And when Senator Eastland appealed to the Army headquarters, they told him the whole story. The story that they told him was one that I had never heard before. All I knew was that Emmett Till was hung on a given date, and the cause of his death was willful misconduct. I was never told what the willful misconduct was. I could not get an answer no matter how I tried and who I appealed to. They would not give me any further information. So my information came when Eastland dug up the dirty work.
And why would Senator Eastland, he's the senator from Mississippi, why would he go to that trouble? What was on his mind, do you think?
Well, he was trying to show that Emmett Till was like his father. That Emmett Till was the one who was guilty for whatever he did to the white woman in the store. That was his way of proving that the murderers had a reason to do what they did.
Was your husband's name Emmett too, or no, just his name?
No, his name was Louis Till.
How do you think the whole case, everything that happened, has changed? How do you think that it changed you?
I am certainly not a dependent person the way I was before Emmett was killed. I was completely dependent upon my mother. I looked to her for guidance, to bear my burdens or whatever had to be done. And then all of a sudden I realized that I could no longer depend on Mama. It was up to me. And it has made a stronger person out of me. I have been able to look beyond my needs and see the needs of others, and I think I've been quite a force in working towards those needs and building boys and girls up in their weak spots.